school, I was on an FLO team. I think the name was the Piggies. It's a very interesting name. And then after FLO, I decided to join an FTC team, which is quality control, and that's where I am today. So today I'm going to teach you guys how to run a successful FLO season, speaking from both my experience and also from some online resources as well. Okay. So the agenda for today's meeting is first, I'm going to give coaches some homework, and afterwards, I'm going to teach you guys how to get started for your FLO team, and then I'm going to discuss the team and team meetings. Finally, the FLO games. This is the technical part. What exactly do you do during your season? And afterwards, some preparations that you need to make for competition day, and also what to expect for it. And then finally, at the end, I believe we'll discuss the Washington Boost account. Okay, so homework for coaches. Your homework is to read some of the documents that are listed in this link. Let me see if I can copy paste that. Uh, Wait, do I need to send the link in the chat or will the presentation be available for everyone to access the links?
We'll send the presentation after the meeting as well.
Okay, yeah,
With
okay.
part
Yeah,
of the call. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so remember, you guys need to look at the team meeting guide, game rulebook, and all these other documents are pretty important. Okay, so how to get started? Okay, first of all, you guys need to set clear goals from day one. Whether it's learning new skills, building stronger teamwork, or aiming for the championship, clear goals help everyone stay motivated and focused throughout the entire season. And also, it's very important to focus on the core values of FLL. The experience is not just about winning the robot game, although that is, in fact, a large component. It's also about learning and growing together. As one of First's most famous slogans said, we are not using kids to build robots, we are using robots to build kids. And we need to incorporate the FLL's core values into your meetings and make sure your team understands the importance of teamwork, discovery, and innovation. Okay, so how should you organize your team? You should split your team into different groups based on strengths and interests. From past experience, it does not go very well if everyone is trying to do everything all at once. So, some of the suggested team roles are to split it into a research team and a build or code team. Although you guys can structure your team in different ways, this is just a suggestion. Note that everyone should get involved. You shouldn't have one team member just sitting there doing nothing, watching everyone else do work. It is good to get involvement from all of the students in the team. And also, your roles should not limit your responsibilities. For example, if a student is a builder, for example, they don't necessarily just have to build. They can also help with programming. They can help with research as well. Okay, so now about the team meeting. You should have meetings at least once every week, and during these meetings, you should have an adult to help drive the meeting and also facilitate it. You should also have breaks and snacks as well. And speaking from personal experience again, we love snacks. Note that meetings can usually be pretty long, and kids can grow disinterested or tired during the meeting. So having these breaks is crucial to maintaining productivity. And also, you should organize work into smaller groups. Having all of the team working on tasks or just individuals working on tasks might not be as productive as if we're using smaller groups. This is somewhat because some younger kids tend to goof around, and the older kids, they can help these younger kids and keep them on task. And this makes it easier for the entire team to focus. And also, you need to remember to set up and clean up the field after each meeting. I cannot tell you how annoying it is to start a team meeting and then you realize that the first thing you have to do is clean up after the mess that you made the previous meeting and also reset up the field. Also, remember to assign homework in between each meeting. The work you do for FLL isn't just the work you do for the meetings. You also have to do work outside of the meetings. For example, it may be something as simple as research or just brainstorming some ideas for a component of the robot. But always remember to keep the flow going and not just have work only at the meetings. Okay, now onto the timeline. Once you define the team's goals, roles, and individual members' commitments, you should define a schedule and also a work plan. So, what's the difference between a schedule and a work plan? The schedule basically says when are you going to do what you're going to do, and the work plan decides how much stuff you're going to do. Because sometimes, especially for rookie teams, you don't want to try and do everything. That's a pretty unrealistic task. So for scheduling, you should work backwards from the competition time because you want to give yourself at least 1 week of time to practice a robot game and presentation prior to the competition. So this is after you pretty much finish building the robot, after you finish your presentation, you have to have a week to rehearse that presentation and also practice um, different things during the robot game. Also, you shouldn't try and complete every mission in the first round, especially for rookie teams. It only gives about 25% of your overall score, so you have to recognize the trade-offs. You should also iterate upon the robot game and the presentation after the first round. This could include doing research. And now on to the FLL game. Each component of the FLL game is assigned 25% of the team's total score. This includes the robot design, the robot game, the core values, and the innovation project. And I will talk more about these later. The main components are two 5-minute presentations and two questions and answer sessions from judges. The first one is on the innovation project, and the second is on the robot design, although it's not necessarily in that order. And for the robot game, you have the score is the highest score taken out of three 2.5-minute runs. Now onto the game breakdown. Again, as I mentioned before, you take the highest score out of the 3 rounds or games that you play. Then you have the robot design and innovation project. And again, this is mainly based on your presentation. So the presentation is a decently important component of the FLO game. And now the by far, I believe, is one of the most important components of FLO, which is core values. And you are judged on your core values by the judges, referees, and the volunteers' observations. And they determine how well the team's behavior aligns with the core values. So, from personal experience, this is pretty important. And sometimes, because it might seem like a small component, it's easy to forget. I remember during one of our FLO games, after we finished the game, we knew it was a terrible run. And then everyone started looking very sad. This isn't really good for the judges. You should always remain decently enthusiastic and also maintain a positive atmosphere, and that really contributes to those core values. Okay, now onto the robot game. Here on the bottom of the screen, you can see 4 different drive bases. Let me see if I can use a laser pointer. Yeah, there's 4 different drive bases. And for rookie teams, I'm going to give you guys a suggestion. You shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Don't try and design different kinds of drive bases. For example, what if we try 5 wheels or we try mounting a wheel sideways? Usually it doesn't work out very well. And normal wheels, they already work pretty well. If you have a different kind of design, it's only going to cause issues later with integration and other stuff. And there's a lot of information on YouTube for designing this space. And you can usually just take something you like and go with it. Later on in the season, you might realize that your base might have some limitations and you might want to try and switch it up a bit. But once again, don't try and design a completely different type of drive base from the very beginning. Okay, and now onto the robot design. One major part of the FLO game is attachments. You don't just have one robot that completes all the tasks. Actually, you just have a drive base or the base of the robot, and then to complete the different tasks, you can swap out attachments, usually when the robot is in the home portion of the field. And as you can see here, these are standard ways to swap attachments. Actually, I'll get into sensors later. But as you can see here, usually attachments consist of just having a few pins, and sometimes they're connected to a motor. And to place on the attachments, you just make an attachment before the competition, of course, and you just plop it on, and then the robot can drive off, and it has this new attachment that can complete a new task. The difference between these, which are powered by motors, and these, which are unpowered, is that For powered attachments, you can have active attachments versus over here, if it's unpowered, you can't have active, you only can have passive attachments. And I'll discuss more about that later. And then also notice that these drive bases, they all have good placements of sensors. And as you can see here, these two are light sensors, usually used for like line following and stuff. And over here, you can see these two as well. So placing the different components of the robot is pretty important. For example, you don't want the attachment slot to be at the bottom of the robot. That's going to cause some issues. Also note that attachments often need to be big to be secure. If you just have a small one block flimsy attachment, it's going to cause issues later. But it also needs to be easy to swap out as well. For example, if you have attachments that click in, like you guys know how Lego usually has that click if you place it all the way down, you usually don't want that because it's kind of hard to remove. And that's going to take away some of those 2.5 minutes you have in the robot game. And those are valuable seconds. And here is the standard attachment in the Lego Spike tutorial. It's pretty easy to build and it has a pin to secure those attachments in the front and back. As you can see, it's these red pins. Over here, you can see that these attachments are also easy to build and swap as well. And now onto the wheels. There are considerations when designing any part of any robot. Over here, I'm just going to mention one small specific component, which is the wheels, which are in fact pretty important because obviously they move your robot around. So this is just one example of a trade-off that you might have when designing a robot. For example, between big wheels or medium and small size wheels. These big wheels, they can move faster because they spin of if they spin at the same speed, it's going to cover a larger distance. But an issue with this is it's going to make the robot turn less accurately. While the mid-size wheel, even though it moves slower, it's more agile and you can turn to a certain angle pretty precisely. And precision as well as speed are both important in FLL. And again, as I mentioned, this is a pretty important trade-off. Okay, now on to attachments. Good attachments make programming easy. So what do I mean when I say this? Effectively, if you have an attachment that just goes on the robot, it does a task, but to program the robot to actually complete the mission, you have to go through 5 movements. That's not necessarily the best thing to do. So your attachments should minimize the work for the software because software can't solve everything. And now I'm going to talk about the active and passive attachments. So active attachments or motorized attachments, they require the robot to power one of the motors to perform the action. So I'm gonna go back over here. So like as I mentioned over here, these motors power these tiny axles and the gears, and when they spin, they can cause different components of the attachment to move. For example, over here, it would cause this arm to move up or down when the motor is powered. However, this might cause some issues. For example, you only have a certain amount of motors that you can place on the robot. And also, sometimes it may have some spatial concerns or something like that. So, this is where passive attachments come into play. You don't need any kind of power. I'm pretty sure this is one of the examples. So, um, all you need to do is attach the attachment to the robot, and then the robot can complete the mission just by driving around. It doesn't need to power the attachments using motors in any way. So, as you can see over here, this is an attachment that can hook onto this object, and it can passively let the object slide in to this loop, which then closes. And now it's secured to the robot without the need of any motors or claws. Hold on a second, gotta lock this door here. Yeah, and also once again, here are some resources. Using resources to design things is pretty important. And now onto the programming section of the robot. There are two main facets to robots: the hardware or the actual build side, and the software or the programming side. And again, some more resources. What's important about programming is you need to have the team back up your code because losing your code is pretty detrimental to the team's progress. You should have the team back up your code with dates every 2 weeks so that way you know when the version is from or whenever the code is in a really good state. For example, you feel like the code's pretty much finished, it can do all the missions and might just need some tuning. Yeah, save it. But if it's in the very beginning and the code still isn't too important to like have or lose, then you don't necessarily need to save it. And once again, you need to name the copy based on the launch number of the robot game. This helps with organization and knowing which version of the code is from which time and which ones to use. So, speaking of naming, this is just one small part of programming. Usually, you should be specific with your naming. Before, when I did FLL and sometimes when I did FTC and I was naming different versions of code, I usually just named it something like thing one, thing two, thing three. And it wasn't exactly the most specific. And it caused me issues later on with realizing which of these things that were suited for the task that I wanted to complete. Okay, now onto the robot game. So first component of the robot game is consistency. Note that the robot doesn't always stop at the same place every time, even if you run the same program. This is because of the butterfly effect. For example, even slight changes in the robot's starting position, or maybe different dust particles on the field can greatly impact how the robot moves. And these small errors, they can accumulate over a long distance. So if the robot travels very far, then it might get skewed a little bit, and that's going to cause issues later on. So you're going to have to realign the robot or get it back on track somehow. And I'm going to talk more about that later as well. Um, it's important to know that Lego is a toy. It's not one of those industrial grade precision machines that always get everything perfect every single time. And even those machines aren't perfect every single time. So Lego does have some like tolerances in terms of how much it can bend and so on. And this is going to reduce that consistency. So, how do you improve it? No, you shouldn't take those industrial grade machines and apply it to FLL. That's probably not allowed and not necessarily the best idea. It's going to be a pretty hard task. So, you can either use software or you can use hardware or physical, right? So, for software, there is two functionalities, which are gyro turn and gyro straight and line following. Well, three, in fact. Gyro refers to gyroscope. There is, I believe, a built-in gyroscope in most of the um, computers on board the robot. And these two, which I will talk more about, helps to improve this consistency. Line following is, again, I will get more into it later, is also a technique to allow the robot to consistently move along a direction. And there are lines painted on most of the robot games in past seasons. This season, I'm not sure whether it's as important, but it allows the robot to travel in a straight line while following the line using sensors. Or you can use a physical solution. For example, after the robot travels a long distance, you can realign against the walls or a funnel, which is, I believe, a structure in this season's game. And this helps to reduce mission time because software is usually pretty slow. You have to wait for the sensors to detect that the robot's going off course. Then you have to feed that information back into the robot and then calculate how much I should move to get back on track and then feed that back into the motors and have it turn back. And by that time, the robot might be even more off track. So physical is pretty decent. I'll get more into this later. You can just run the robot against a wall and it will have an orientation that you want, which is perpendicular to the wall. So now on gyro turn and gyro straight. Again, this uses a built-in gyro sensor to make turns more accurate. And this is usually more useful, again, resources. And gyro straight helps the robot stay straight while moving across the mat. And once again, resources. And now onto line following. Most of the time, this is a pretty good way for the robot to move through the mat. However, it tends to be pretty slow, even with um, other techniques like PID to help it align back quicker. It's usually slower than the other alignment methods. And this year's challenge, as you can see in this game field, only has 3 lines and they're all very small. So for this season, we can skip this. Yeah. Another technique, as I mentioned before, is to realign to either the wall or a line. To do this, your robot needs to have a flat front or back. For example, if your robot is a rectangle over here, it can align against this wall because it's flat against the wall. If your robot isn't flat, then after you ram into the wall, the robot's still going to be slanted. So this is also useful after traveling for a long distance and then after the robot realigns, then you can be in the correct orientation for the next mission. You can also have the machine drive along the wall. For example, if the robot's over here, you can have it drive along the wall to go relatively straight. If it goes too much to the right, it's going to correct itself because it knows it's running into the wall and it's going to push it back effectively. But this might cause some issues with like friction and stuff. You can also use two light sensors to make sure the machine turns and aligns itself with a line. For example, let's say it's over here, right? The robot's a rectangle over here. It drives backwards into the line. Then it tries to align itself so that it's around parallel to the line. And it acts just like a wall, except there's no physical barrier to realign the robot. And this is just one example of a path you could take with realignment. Okay, and now onto the funnel. The robot can align itself to a mission, so it can be more accurate. Again, this has the same principles as aligning to the wall. There's not much difference, except it's not to the wall, but rather to a structure. Note that you have to use seconds for moving if you're doing this kind of alignment instead of rotation or distance. This is because if the robot uses distance, it's going to keep trying to go forward while still continuously ramming into an object that it's not going to push aside. And that's going to cause issues with the robot stalling. Same thing with rotation for a certain angle. Usually you just have it move for a certain amount of seconds and it should be good. Okay, now on to game strategy. Again, this resource has a lot of good information that can help inspire teams regarding attachments. You should also design your path based on the attachments you build. For example, certain attachments may take up certain amounts of spaces, or they may have to be placed on certain parts on the robot. And out any one time, you can't put on all the attachments. You can only put on, I think, on average, like two or three. And you have to plan out which attachments do I want to have on the robot at which times. And this will determine your pathing because the attachments correspond to certain missions. So you probably want to go to the missions that the attachments correspond with. And now how to optimize the robot game. You should have a consistent launching position for the robot. And this might mean having a small device that allows the robot to just start in pretty much the same exact position every time. This can be as simple as a small Lego plane or just block, I should say. And you just push the robot against it so that it starts from pretty much the same position every time. There are different ways of prioritizing the missions. You can either do the easy missions first, or you can do things like missions that are closer together, or maybe you can do missions that are harder to get more points early on in the game. But usually, I would recommend easy missions first, because this way, if the robot does the harder missions, it has a higher chance of screwing up. And if it screws up and gets stuck out in the field, you're not going to have enough time to complete those easier missions later on because the robot's stuck. You should also minimize the number of launches because um, less launches mean more time for the robot. Each time the robot comes back to the home area, you're going to have to replace attachments, realign the robot and everything, and have it go back out, and that takes time. So you should let the robot stay out there for as long as possible, complete as many missions as possible before going back to the base. You should also give plenty of time to practice swapping these attachments because, as simple as it may seem, putting a Lego piece on a robot, this actually takes a decent amount of practice, especially when the robot might be moving, for example. And you need to practice aligning the attachments, placing them on. Um, and you should also time yourself for this to see how much time you take to put on attachments. This way, you know whether you're improving, which techniques can put the attachments on a bit quicker. And also, during the robot game, are you going to have enough time to complete the tasks you want to? You should also not practice this too early because if the teams are still tweaking their code or their robot, then maybe some attachments might get replaced or other attachments might be removed and your practice will go to waste. So you should wait until usually late season before you start doing this. You should also get the free point for having all the attachments in the robot fit within the launch area. This basically means that you should have all of the components and everything fit into a certain um, not intangible box. And you should also go to YouTube and learn about other team strategies and see if you can learn from this. And you should only do this if the team is stuck or after they've gone through the learning progress process and want to learn some more. And now onto the innovation project. There are quite a few steps to the innovation project because this is a decently large component of FLL. So first, you have to understand the challenge theme. You should review the season's theme and discuss its meaning with your team. What does it mean? What exactly is the theme? You should then brainstorm ideas. What kinds of projects should we create? And to determine what kind of projects we should create, we should start from step one, which is we have to notice what problems we notice in our daily lives because innovations or projects, they're usually meant to solve problems. You can also ask questions like what can be improved through technology or processes. Then you should research. You should split into different groups to research problem areas. Once again, splitting into groups is very useful. Having individual research or research as an entire team might not be as productive. And you should look for issues that affect many people or haven't been solved efficiently. So you should think big. Some examples for this is if you have an issue that you know how to solve, it's amazing. You have an amazing innovation project idea, but it only helps two people. That's not really going to impress the judges, and it's not exactly a good innovation project. So these should solve good problems. And also, another way to solve it is another way to create a project is you have to find more efficient or better solutions to problems because in our world we have problems, there are solutions to those problems, but they aren't necessarily the best solutions. So finding a problem that doesn't have a solution is one way, but also improving current solutions to current problems is also another way of innovating and creating projects. After that, you should narrow down the focus. You should choose a specific problem that interests the team, is manageable, and has a meaningful impact. I believe that each of these three components are all pretty important. If you have an innovation project that doesn't interest the team, it's hard to get the team inspired and working on this project. You should also have it be relatively manageable. For example, if you have this miracle pill solution that suddenly solves death by natural causes for everyone and makes everyone immortal, but also your solution is some kind of magical medicine that no one knows how to create, that isn't really a good innovation project. And once again, you have to have a meaningful impact. If it helps just one or two people, that is not really a good innovation project. After that, you should consult experts. You should either talk to people affected by the problem or experts in the field of the problem to gain deeper insights. You have to talk to people affected by the problem to see their perspective, see how they are affected and how do they see this problem, or experts in the field to see what current solutions are they trying, what approaches are they using, right? And after that, you should encourage creativity. Creativity is a pretty important component of the innovation project. You shouldn't try and reinvent something. For example, there is this current issue, which is people aren't getting where they want to get to. And I have this new solution, which is we build this machine that has four wheels and it's powered by a motor, and people sit in it and it goes to the place you want to get to. If that sounds familiar, it probably is because that's a car. You have to think creatively. And you have to use techniques like Scamper to improve or innovate on current solutions. So Scamper is a pretty good mnemonic to remember the different types of techniques to think of creative ideas. For example, um, improving on a solution is one, or finding or innovating, changing it in some way, making it less costly. And there are many ways to improve different solutions or create new ones. After that, you should choose a feasible solution. You should select one that is doable with the team's resources and time frame and excites the group. After that, you should test and refine this innovation project. Usually, you should create a prototype or plan, then test it and make adjustments as needed, right? So we want something physical or something actually tangible to represent your innovation project instead of just a concept. And then afterwards, you should make sure that it aligns with the core values. Once again, core values are very important in FLL. You should ensure that your solution reflects the FLL core values, for example, teamwork and community impact. You can get some ideas for the innovation project from Challenge Story, from the engineering notebook, or from these other sources. And for the presentation and the judging section, you should create a trifold, which usually contains most of the information that your innovation project is about. And as you can see here, these are examples of like tiny prototypes that you could create. Okay, now on to the judging session. Once again, our resources will be sent, I believe, and this resource contains a list of the commonly asked questions by judges. When preparing your presentation, you should make sure you at least cover some of these questions and have the team practice answering these questions. It's good to be prepared. Sometimes the judges may not ask questions. Actually, they will not ask all their questions from within this list. And it's good to be prepared. Usually they might ask some variants of these questions, so rehearsing how to respond to these questions is a good idea. But then again, you shouldn't memorize the team's answers to these questions. For example, you have a question, what does your team do? And then a kid just spouts out 2 minute long um, a rehearsed, memorized portion of speech that just answers the question. And they're doing a very robotic and monotone voice because they've clearly memorized it. That's not going to impress the judges. When in the judging session and within the presentation, you should be human and interact with the judges as if they're humans and not people that just um, take what you say and then assume that you thought of it on the spot. You should also make sure you finish by the end of 5 minutes because the judge can and they will stop you if you go over the time limit. Some other judges may not consider anything you say after that time limit. So you need to practice to make sure that you um, finish under this time limit. Or even during the presentation itself, if you find that maybe you're going a bit slower, then speed up the presentation, maybe skip over some unimportant details. And all judges are volunteers and don't make assumptions. And as you can see here, this is a flowchart of the judging session. First is a team welcome, then there is a presentation for the innovation project, which is 5 minutes. After that is a Q&A session for the innovation project. Oh, wait, I think someone's microphone is unmuted. Could you please check and see if it's unmuted and maybe mute it? Thanks. And then afterwards, you go on to the robot design portion of um, the presentation and judging sessions. So you explain different components of your robot design to the judges, and then they ask questions about it, which you answer. After that, you have a final share and feedback, which is usually up to 8 minutes. Okay, on competition day, you should usually bring an extra battery and parts if possible, because sometimes parts may break or they may get lost, and you need to have backups. It's pretty important. And also, once again, have snacks and water for the kids. Um, as parents or adults, you guys might not understand the importance of snacks, and I can tell you that it's very, very, very important. You should also arrange lunch because this is a day-long event and hungry kids usually aren't happy. And with respect to the robot game, you should book the practice mat as soon as it becomes available. This is partially because they have stopped allowing teams to put their mats on the floor for practice. Something that is important is you have to look for time to practice on the competition table. This is usually look for this time in the morning when it's less crowded, I assume. And to create a sense of unity, you should have the team wear a team T-shirt or at least the same color, so that the team is seen as a whole instead of just a bunch of different disjoint students. And for the judging session, once again, to cultivate that sense of unity and as a team, you should wear props. For example, this year's season is about water in the ocean, so you could have swimming goggles. Don't take that idea. There's probably going to be more than one team that has swimming goggles. Just be creative. And now onto the event schedule. Um, this is general information. You're going to receive more specific details about the event later on. And I think it's aiming for about 24 to 28 team events. And as you can see here, this is a schedule. Usually the check-in starts about 30-ish to like 45 minutes before anything interesting actually starts. Afterwards, you have a coaches meeting, then practice time for about 3 hours. And this isn't just practice. You can also use this time to iterate a bit more on your robot or tune some things, make some last changes. Then judging also happens during this time, so these two sections overlap. And then the opening ceremonies to the actual game starts at about 1, and afterwards you have qualification matches for about 3 hours. I think lunch is either between judging and opening ceremonies or um, sometime in between qualification matches, and then afterwards it's awards. Okay, and now on elimination. This is a pretty tough and competitive competition. Usually how many teams get eliminated depends on the total number of teams. In Washington, the first round usually has 60 teams divided over 2 days, and only about 7 teams from each day m- move on to the next round. So this is about a fourth of the teams. Then you have something very similar in the semifinal, then the state final, and if you make it past the state final, you got to compete in Worlds. So, what should you do as a coach? Each kid is different. They might learn in different ways. They might decide to contribute to the team in different ways. But having fun and most importantly, learning is pretty decently important for the FLL game. You should also ask for other parents' help. It is not the role of just one coach to manage everything, and they might get pretty busy or overwhelmed. Remember that help is always available from other parents. And you can encourage them or pressure them to do better, but ultimately it's their competition and not yours. And the goal of FLL isn't necessarily to do well, to do good, get some results, impress the parents, and maybe later on impress the colleges. The purpose of FLO is to have fun and learn. So, especially in your first year, don't try and aim for excessively high results. Just take FLO as an experience rather than a competition, even though it is a competition. You should also make the team practice. Again, practice is important. Practice doesn't make perfect, but it does help you improve. And you should join this monthly FLO coaches chat, which is in this link. Okay, here are some important dates for the FLO challenge, which I believe someone else will share right now.
Thank you, Rick. So as you can see, those are the date that sorry, those are the date that is for Washington State only. So this is just a reference. So you can see the first qualification matches will happen on the first and the second week of December. After that, the semifinal will be in January. And then for all other state, if your team is not in Washington State, you should probably get an email, whatnot, about where the date is. Next slide. And then this is only applied to Washington State team again. So if your company has a matching or any sort of volunteer work or contribution, you definitely want to look into this. Next slide. So the way it works is that you will create a booster account. And then if you contribute to this account, and then you can have your company match your contribution to that booster account. And then after that, you can use Expensify apps to claim some of the registration fee, snacks, t-shirt, or whatnot through that booster account, and then you get a refinance. Again, you should definitely look into it if your company have a matching for that. All right, next slide. So I think that's all the information we want to share with all of you. And if you want us to continue mentoring for you, have more discussion, you're more than happy to join our Discord server. That's where the Discord server link to join, or you can use the QR code. Uh, when you join, make sure you put in your name and your team number so we know your name, so we can set up some private chat for you as well. And of course, if you have more questions, we can ask it now. If not, you can always email us and we're more than happy to answer. I think the floor is open for any questions.
This question might be too broad, but do you have any examples of past innovation projects? I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around like what's too big and what's too small and how detailed the research needs to be.
Okay.
Uh,
So Rick, you
uh,
want to go?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I can go. Yeah. So I believe our innovation project, you don't necessarily have to make like a full-fledged product or anything for your innovation project. Usually you just make a small prototype or example of how it would work. I believe my team's innovation project was on this heat molded polymer which could act as a shield for delivery drones and then like fed through tubes on the drone to shield different parts of the drone. Um, and I believe we did decently extensive research into, like, for example, how fragile drones are, or maybe where the drone needs to go, and so on. And also, sometimes I think we also research like different components of delivery drones, what you have to take into account, such as the early stage, late stage, and middle stage and final stage of delivery. And for example, the final stage would be actually delivering it into the house, and different considerations with what potential obstacles that the drone could smash into, and what damages that they may cause, and so on.
I can add a little bit to that. So again, like Rick has talked about earlier, is that something that the kid is passionate about, and then you just want to make sure that the project is meaningful and has a huge impact, and then that will be it. Mostly is that the kid had fun, solve a problem, and build a prototype. I think that's basically it. Yeah.
Could you please tell me what is an ideal team size?
From my experience, I think a team size anywhere from 4 to 6 team member are a good size because it's a lot easier to manage, and then every kid would get to do a little bit more work. If you have anywhere more than like 7, it's kind of okay. Like 8, 9, 10 would be way too much because it's really hard to divide the work to make it meaningful for the kid to learn. And it's also hard to do presentation, logistic, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
I can also confirm that. I think our team had 7 members. Usually, when we had about 5 or 6, it was pretty productive meeting. But after like 7 members, or I think we might have had 8. Yeah, after 8, 7, 8 members came, it became kind of chaotic.
All right. We have someone, Serena, raise the hand. Go ahead.
Yes. So this is related, similar to the innovation project. We have a very young team, mostly 10-year-old with the rookie team. And they all seem to gravitate on the innovation project towards topics that are more related to ocean conservation and sustainability. And so we feel like we can justify why keeping a healthy ocean directly impacts ocean explorers. But we're also kind of on the fence as adults about if we should be steering them towards directly problems that are specific to ocean explorers. What's your opinion on that?
I think they're both good projects. I mean, if you can save the ocean, make it better, I think that's definitely works well because that also align with one of the missions that you can see on the robot game. As far as exploring, I think that's also a good thing as well because you can look into more about like what kind of technology you can use to make ocean exploring safe compared to like the one of the incident happened a few months ago. So that's also a really good area to explore. And then I think it'll be fun in the presentation. You can bring a fish tank and then maybe put your prototype and see how it go to the fish tank and whatnot. I think that'll be a good presentation idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any more questions?
A question regarding to the parents helping to organize the meetings. Is there any guidance that we can follow that for each of the meeting? What would be the goal for the team to make progress?
Yes. So in the first slides where Rick has talked about, which is the homework for the parents. So there's one document in there, I believe is engineering notebook or maybe a team meeting guide. So in the team meeting guide, it actually has a breakdown of like 12 weeks of like what you should do on every week to make progress for your team. So you can definitely look into that.
is that the typical guidance we shall follow, or there something else differently we can?
Well, when I was coaching the team, we usually just set a goal and then we just kind of like work through it, and then just as much as we can get it done like 1 week before the competition is what we aim for, and then there's really not much you can do because kids are being kids. I mean, they can only do that much. I mean, you cannot really kind of force them to do overtime or whatnot. So it's really hard to have a clear cut. But it's more just how you, as a parent, how you drive it, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Rebecca has questions.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for doing this. It's super helpful. And I was just wondering about your thoughts and Rick's thoughts about the presentation. I've heard that some teams get kind of into like doing sort of like a skit or a theatrical presentation of the information. And we did just a very dry presentation last year. We're a little bit more going to be a little bit more ready for it this year, but I'm just wondering what your take on that is. And we've got 4 11-year-old boys, so I'm not sure they're going to be like strumming ukuleles and singing like I've seen in some of the videos. But I mean, what's your thought?
I think if you have a sketch, making it fun would definitely demonstrate some of the core value for FLL for sure.
Okay.
But I think the key point is that you want to deliver the value to the judges so they understand what you accomplish, because all the judges are volunteers. So you really don't know what are their take and their tastes are. So it's really hard to judge. But I think making it fun is always good to do. Yeah, that would be
my
What
are your thoughts, Rick?
Yeah. And
my personal experience, we also had a pretty dry presentation as well.
Yeah.
I'd say usually to make the presentation a bit more engaging for the judges is just to have the students be passionate about the topic they're presenting on. If they're passionate, then the rest will usually follow immediately. You don't have to go like too over the top, like for example, playing music. If it doesn't directly relate to the topic the robot gave your presentation, it might be a bit distracting for the judges.
Yeah.
But having like smaller elements, like I don't know, sliding in a few jokes about the robot or something like that, that could be
Or a fish tank.
Yeah, yeah, or a fish tank. Yeah, just something unique to make your team stand out. That definitely won't hurt. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I mean, we're definitely trying to find something that they're all passionate about. But again, for 11-year-old boys, we're still trying to stir the pot on that one. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, I think we have time for one more questions. Okay, I guess that's all we have for tonight then. Thank you so much for attending this, and we're looking forward to help mentoring and help you to get a better FLL season going for this year. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.